Okay, family, Trump just get shot to fuck down. All the powers that we're using, the military, the, the guards, the National Guard, all that shit. The Supreme Court said, no, you're enough. You've been doing enough. You gotta stop this shit. This is enough. No, you can't do no more. You want me to say they did the shit. The Supreme Court said, no, Trump, your shit gotta stop. You destroy the White House, build it the way you want to build it, and you put in National Guard in different states. They said, no, 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 you're not going along with the Constitution. You want to be this shit. This shit gotta stop. So you guess put a ban on him. Check it out first. Check it out. You guess put a ban on him. Say, no, this shit you're doing gotta stop. Gotta come to a stop.
The Supreme Court just dropped a bombshell ruling that effectively collapses much of Trump's executive.
Breaking news out of Portland. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has overturned Judge Emmerich order blocking the federalization of the National Guard, which means President Trump can. Am I right? Big deal?
It is a big deal, and I want to just correct one thing and then explain why functionally it is the same. This is a stay of Judge Emmerich's opinion, and just from a little bit of the beginning of this 93-page opinion, it says, after considering the record, and by the record they mean all the factual evidence at this preliminary stage,
All right, so what just happened is absolutely seismic. The Supreme Court just dropped a bombshell ruling that effectively collapses much of Trump's executive authority. In a stunning 7-2 decision issued late at night, the court struck down several of Trump's most sweeping executive powers, calling them unconstitutional expansions that violate separation of powers. Analysts are calling this a constitutional neutron bomb. The unsigned opinion invalidated Trump's directives, granting himself unilateral control over independent agencies and state National Guard units. And the decision immediately froze dozens of White House orders, creating what insiders are describing as administrative paralysis across multiple federal departments. This is the biggest judicial check on a sitting president in over 50 years, and it came from a Supreme Court that includes 3 justices Trump himself appointed. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right.
When a hurricane video. And this matter is tried and it gets back to an appellate court through an ordinary process where they have full briefing and full evidence that they still think Donald Trump is likely to prevail there because he has the discretion to determine as the president.
Let me break down what actually happened, because this is complicated but incredibly important. Trump has been issuing executive orders throughout his second term that massively expand presidential power. He's claimed total authority over independent agencies that are supposed to be insulated from political control. He's asserted the right to deploy state National Guard units for domestic law enforcement without state consent. He's tried to give himself budgetary autonomy and control over federal hiring and firing that normally requires congressional approval. Basically, Trump has been trying to turn the presidency into an office with almost unlimited unilateral power. And the Supreme Court just said no in the strongest possible terms. According to Reuters and NPR, the justices ruled that Trump's delegation, orders granting himself total authority over independent commissions and military deployments, were unconstitutional expansions of executive power. Total authority. That was Trump's language in his executive orders. He literally claimed total authority. And the Supreme Court, in a 7-2 decision, said that's not how the Constitution works. Presidents don't have total authority. They have limited powers defined by the Constitution and constrained by Congress and the courts. The court's emergency order specifically halts Trump's use of state National Guard troops for domestic law enforcement operations. This has been a major flashpoint. Trump has been trying to federalize National Guard units from various states and use them for immigration enforcement, protest control, and other domestic operations. States like Oregon and Illinois have been fighting this in court, arguing that Trump doesn't have the authority to take control of their military forces. Lower courts had already blocked some of these deployments, and now the Supreme Court has shut down the entire framework Trump was using to assert this power. In her concurrence, Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote that no president may nullify Congress by decree. That's a Trump appointee, someone Trump put on the court specifically because he thought she'd be loyal to conservative principles. And she's telling him that he can't just issue decrees that override congressional authority. That's huge, because it shows that even justices who might be philosophically aligned with Trump recognize that what he's been doing goes too far, that his claims of executive power are so extreme that they threaten the constitutional order itself. Chief Justice Roberts went even further, warning that unchecked authority strikes at the marrow of the republic itself. The marrow of the republic. That's incredibly strong language from the Chief Justice. He's saying that Trump's power grabs aren't just legally questionable, They're existentially threatening to American democracy, that if allowed to stand, they would fundamentally alter the nature of our government from a system of checks and balances to something closer to executive dictatorship. The practical impact is immediate and severe. White House officials told the Washington Post that the ruling effectively suspends over 30 executive orders, 30 orders. That includes Trump's directives on immigration enforcement, budgetary autonomy, and federal layoffs. All of those orders are now invalid. Federal agencies are being forced to return to pre-order structures by week's end. That means policies that have been in effect for months are suddenly being unwound. Programs that were operating under Trump's expanded authority have to stop. The entire administrative apparatus that Trump built to exercise unprecedented presidential power is being dismantled by judicial order. Legal experts are calling this the judiciary's biggest check on a sitting president in over 50 years. They're drawing parallels to United States v. Nixon in 1974, the case that forced Nixon to release the Watergate tapes and ultimately led to his resignation. That was the Supreme Court telling a president that he's not above the law and doesn't have unlimited executive privilege. This ruling is similar, but potentially even more sweeping, because it's not just about one specific controversy. It's about the fundamental scope of presidential power, and the court is saying Trump has massively exceeded that scope. The 7-2 vote is significant. This wasn't a 5-4 decision along ideological lines. This was 7 justices, including conservatives and Trump appointees, agreeing that Trump has gone too far. Only 2 justices dissented. That suggests the legal issues were clear enough that even justices who might want to give Trump deference concluded they couldn't support what he was doing. When you lose 7-2 on questions of executive power, that's the court sending a strong message that you've completely exceeded your authority. White House aides are privately acknowledging that this ruling crippled much of the administration's internal authority. They're calling it a constitutional ambush. That language reveals how unexpected this was. Trump and his team apparently thought they could keep pushing the boundaries of presidential power, and the courts would let them, but the Supreme Court just drew a hard line. And now Trump's entire governance model, which was based on unilateral executive action without congressional approval or judicial oversight, has been declared unconstitutional. This is happening at the worst possible time for Trump. He's already dealing with multiple scandals, the Canada trade disaster, the DOJ corruption investigations, Kash Patel's perjury, Adam Schiff's indictment backlash, the illegal White House demolition, Melania's lawsuit, and now the Supreme Court has taken away many of the tools he's been using to exercise power. He can't use executive orders to do whatever he wants anymore. He actually has to work within constitutional constraints, and that's going to severely limit what he can accomplish for the rest of his term. Let's dig into why this ruling is so devastating for Trump. Okay, so here's what most people aren't fully grasping about this Supreme Court ruling, and I mean really aren't grasping. Everyone's focused on the immediate impact, the 30 executive orders being suspended, the National Guard deployments being halted, the administrative paralysis, and all of that is important and dramatic. But the deeper significance is what this ruling says about the limits of presidential power and how fundamentally it rejects Trump's entire approach to governing. Because Trump has been operating on the theory that the presidency is essentially an elected dictatorship, that once you win the election, you have nearly unlimited power to do whatever you want. And the Supreme Court
Hell
just
no.
said that's
Nope.
completely wrong.
That's
That's
totally
not
wrong.
what the Constitution establishes. And that entire governance model is unconstitutional. Let's talk about what Trump has been trying to do with executive power.
Trying to be a dictator.
Throughout his second term, he's issued executive orders claiming authority that presidents traditionally haven't had. He's asserted control over independent agencies like the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission. These agencies are designed to be somewhat insulated from political control because they regulate markets and protect consumers. They're supposed to make decisions based on expertise and law, not based on what the president wants politically. But Trump issued orders saying these agencies report directly to him, that he can override their decisions, that he has total authority
Hell
over
no.
their operations. That's a massive expansion of presidential power, because if the president controls all the independent agencies, then there's no real independence. They just become arms of the White House, doing whatever the president demands, and that undermines their entire purpose. Trump also claimed the authority to federalize state National Guard units and deploy them domestically without state consent. The National Guard has a unique dual status. Units are normally under state control, commanded by governors. They can be federalized for specific purposes, like responding to national emergencies or supporting military operations overseas. But there are strict limits on using federal military forces for domestic law enforcement. That's the Posse Comitatus Act, which was passed after the Civil War specifically to prevent presidents from using the military as a domestic police force. Trump has been trying to bypass those restrictions. He's claimed he can take control of state guard units and use them for immigration enforcement, protest control, and other domestic operations. That's
I
exactly
want to be a
what Posse
dictator.
Comitatus was designed to prevent, and it's what the Supreme Court just shut down. The court said Trump's assertion of authority to deploy military forces domestically violates both constitutional principles and federal law. The separation of powers issues are fundamental. The Constitution divides power among three branches of government. Congress makes laws, the president executes them, courts interpret them, and each branch is supposed to check the others so that no single branch becomes too powerful. That system only works if each branch stays within its lane and respects the authority of the others. Trump has been consistently violating that framework. He's claimed he can ignore congressional legislation he doesn't like. He's asserted the power to do things that require congressional authorization without getting that authorization. He's defied court orders and congressional subpoenas. He's treated the other branches as obstacles to be overcome rather than as co-equal partners in governance. And the Supreme Court just said that's unconstitutional, that the president doesn't get to decide unilaterally how much power he has. The Constitution decides. And Trump has exceeded what the Constitution allows. Justice Barrett's concurrence is particularly significant because she's a Trump appointee. She's a conservative justice who generally favors strong executive power, but even she looked at what Trump was doing
It's
and
totally
concluded
wrong.
it was too much. Her statement that no president may nullify Congress by decree is a direct rebuke of Trump's governance style, because that's exactly what Trump has been doing. Congress passes laws establishing how agencies should operate or what military deployments are authorized, and Trump issues executive orders that effectively nullify those laws by claiming he has overriding authority. Barrett is saying that's not permissible, that executive orders can't override congressional legislation, that presidents have to work within the legal framework Congress establishes. That's basic separation of powers, but it's apparently something Trump needed to be told explicitly by the Supreme Court. Chief Justice Roberts' warning about unchecked authority striking at the marrow of the republic is even stronger. Roberts is not known for hyperbole or dramatic language. He's generally careful and measured in his opinions. So when he uses language like strikes at the marrow of the republic, he's expressing genuine alarm. He's saying that what Trump has been doing isn't just legally wrong, it's threatening to the survival of constitutional democracy. Because if presidents can claim unlimited power and face no effective checks, then we don't have a republic anymore, we have an autocracy. The fact that this was a 7-2 decision is remarkable. Supreme Court decisions on major constitutional questions are often 5-4, split along ideological lines. But this was 7-2. That means justices across the ideological spectrum looked at Trump's assertions of power and concluded they were indefensible. The majority included all three liberal justices, Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch. 3 Trump appointees voted against him. That tells you how extreme his claims were. We don't know who the 2 dissenters were from the reporting, but it's likely Justices Thomas and Alito, who have generally been most sympathetic to broad executive power. But even if that's true, the fact that they couldn't get a third vote shows that Trump's position was so extreme that even conservative justices who might want to support him couldn't do so. The immediate practical impact is chaos in the administration. White House officials are saying the ruling crippled their internal authority. Federal agencies that have been operating under Trump's expanded executive orders now have to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. Are previous policies still in effect? Do they go back to how things were before Trump's orders? Who has authority to make decisions? The legal uncertainty is massive, and it affects some of Trump's highest priorities. Immigration enforcement has been operating under expanded executive authority. Now those operations might have to be scaled back or restructured. The mass federal layoffs Trump ordered are affected. Federal agencies might not be able to fire employees the way Trump wanted. Budget decisions that Trump made unilaterally might be invalid. The entire administrative apparatus is having to reassess what it's doing and whether it has legal authority to do it. The comparison to United States v. Nixon is apartment. That case established that presidents don't have unlimited executive privilege, that they can't shield information from criminal investigations just by claiming executive authority. It was a historic limitation on presidential power that Nixon had to accept, and it contributed to his downfall because the tapes that were released show his involvement in criminal obstruction. This ruling is similar in that it establishes clear limits on what presidents can do. They can't claim unlimited authority over independent agencies. They can't federalize military forces for domestic law enforcement without proper authorization. They can't issue executive orders that effectively nullify congressional legislation. Those are bright line rules that will apply not just to Trump, but to future presidents. The court is trying to prevent the presidency from becoming a dictatorship by clearly defining where executive power ends. The political implications are also huge. Trump has already been facing multiple crises, and now he's lost a major court battle that undermines his ability to govern the way he wants. He can't just issue executive orders to solve problems anymore. He has to work with Congress. He
Good.
has to respect independent agencies.
Good.
He has to follow the law. and Trump has shown throughout his presidency that he's terrible at working within constraints. His instinct is always to bulldoze through obstacles, but the Supreme Court has just erected an obstacle that he can't bulldoze through. This is also going to embolden Trump's opponents. Congressional Democrats are going to see this as vindication. The courts are finally checking Trump's abuses. That's going to lead to more aggressive oversight, more investigations, more demands for accountability, because the Supreme Court has essentially said that concerns about Trump exceeding his authority are legitimate and well-founded. That's going to make it harder for Republicans to dismiss those concerns as partisan attacks, and it's going to affect the 2026 midterms. Voters are going to see that even a conservative Supreme Court concluded Trump was violating the Constitution. That's a powerful message. It suggests that concerns about Trump's authoritarian tendencies aren't just Democratic talking points. They're real constitutional problems that even Trump's own appointees recognize. That could sway moderate voters who might have been willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. All right, let's break down what actually matters here, because this Supreme Court ruling is genuinely historic and has massive implications. There are 4 core points. Point number 1, this ruling fundamentally rejects Trump's theory of presidential power and reestablishes constitutional limits. Trump has been governing based on the idea that the president has nearly unlimited authority, that he can do whatever he thinks is necessary without congressional approval or judicial oversight, that executive power is essentially boundless as long as the president claims national security or executive privilege. The Supreme Court just said that's completely wrong. The Constitution doesn't create an all-powerful presidency. It creates a limited executive that operates within constraints established by Congress and enforced by courts. Presidents can't claim total authority. They can't override congressional legislation. They can't federalize military forces for domestic law enforcement without proper authorization. These are fundamental principles of separation of powers, and Trump has been violating them systematically. By striking down Trump's executive orders in a 7-2 decision, including votes from 3 justices Trump appointed, the court has sent a clear message. Presidential power has limits, and Trump has exceeded those limits. This isn't a partisan decision. This is the judiciary doing its constitutional job of checking executive overreach. And the fact that conservative justices joined the majority shows that Trump's position was so extreme that even justices sympathetic to executive power couldn't support it. Point number 2, the ruling creates immediate administrative paralysis that will severely limit Trump's ability to govern for the remainder of his term. 30 executive orders suspended, immigration enforcement operations potentially scaled back, federal layoff directives potentially invalid, budget autonomy rescinded, National Guard deployments halted. All of these were key tools Trump was using to implement his agenda, and they're now gone. Trump is going to have to figure out how to govern within normal constitutional constraints. That means working with Congress to get legislation passed instead of just issuing executive orders. It means respecting the independence of regulatory agencies instead of trying to control them directly. It means following legal processes for things like federal hiring and budgeting instead of trying to do everything unilaterally. And Trump has shown throughout his presidency that he's terrible at all of those things. He doesn't like negotiating with Congress. He doesn't respect independent institutions. He doesn't want to follow processes that slow him down or limit his options. His entire approach has been to use executive power to bypass normal constraints, and the Supreme Court just took away his ability to do that, so he's either going to have to fundamentally change how he operates, which seems unlikely given his personality, or he's going to be unable to accomplish much of anything for the rest of his term. The administrative paralysis is also going to affect federal agencies directly. Career employees who've been implementing Trump's executive orders now don't know if they should continue. Legal offices and agencies are scrambling to figure out what's still valid and what isn't. Programs are being put on hold pending legal guidance. The uncertainty is going to slow down government operations across the board, and while some of that might be good if it stops harmful Trump policies, it's also going to affect legitimate government functions that have nothing to do with Trump's overreach. Point number 3, this ruling could trigger a wave of additional legal challenges and congressional investigations. Because if the Supreme Court says Trump exceeded his authority in these areas, people are going to look at other things he's done and ask whether those also exceeded his authority. There are going to be more lawsuits challenging other executive orders, more cases questioning whether Trump had legal authority for various actions, and courts are going to be more skeptical of executive power claims after this ruling. Congressional Democrats are also going to be emboldened. They're going to see this as proof that their concerns about Trump's constitutional violations are legitimate. That's going to lead to more aggressive oversight, more subpoenas, more hearings. They're going to investigate how Trump's executive orders were developed, whether legal advice was ignored, whether Trump was warned that what he was doing was unconstitutional and did it anyway. All of that is going to create more political headaches for an administration that's already drowning in scandals. and it's going to affect the Justice Department and FBI investigations.
The
The
whole
ruling mentions
cookie
that
gonna
legal
crumble.
analysts predict a wave of congressional investigations into Bonday's DOJ and Patel's FBI leadership, because if Trump's executive power claims were illegitimate, questions arise about whether investigations and prosecutions conducted under those claims were also illegitimate. Defense attorneys in cases like Adam Schiff's indictment are going to argue that the prosecutions were based on authority Trump didn't legally have. That could undermine a lot of the political prosecutions Trump has been pursuing. Point number 4. This is a historic moment that will shape presidential power for generations. Legal scholars are calling this the biggest check on presidential authority in 50 years. They're comparing it to United States v. Nixon. That's the kind of decision that gets studied in law schools and cited in future cases for decades. It establishes precedents about what presidents can and can't do that will constrain not just Trump, but all future presidents. That's actually really important for the long-term health of American democracy, because Trump isn't going to be president forever. Eventually, there will be other presidents from both parties. And if Trump's expansive claims of executive power had been allowed to stand, every future president could have claimed the same authority. Democratic presidents could have claimed total authority over independent agencies and deployed military forces domestically. That would have fundamentally altered the balance of power in American government. By striking down Trump's claims, the Supreme Court is preventing that shift. It's saying that the presidency remains a limited office defined by the Constitution, that separation of powers still matters, that Congress and courts can still check executive overreach. That's going to make it harder for future presidents to become authoritarian, regardless of their party. And that's good for democracy, even if it's bad for Trump's ability to implement his agenda. So what happens next? Trump is probably going to attack the Supreme Court. He's going to claim the decision is wrong or politically motivated. He might even hint at defying it, though that would create a full-blown constitutional crisis. White House lawyers are going to scramble to figure out how to salvage what they can of Trump's agenda within the new constraints the court has imposed. Federal agencies are going to need guidance on what they're supposed to do now. Congress is going to hold hearings about what Trump was doing and why he thought he had authority that the Supreme Court says he didn't have. Democrats are going to use this ruling as a political weapon heading into the midterms. Republicans are going to be in the awkward position of trying to defend a president who just got slapped down 17-2 by a court that includes 3 of his own appointees. The bottom line is this. The Supreme Court issued a landmark 7-2 ruling striking down Trump's claims of total authority over independent agencies and state National Guard units. The decision invalidated over 30 executive orders and created immediate administrative paralysis. 3 Trump appointees joined the majority in ruling that Trump violated separation of powers and exceeded constitutional limits on presidential authority. This is the biggest judicial check on a sitting president in over 50 years. It fundamentally rejects Trump's theory of unlimited executive power. It severely limits his ability to govern for the remainder of his term. It will trigger additional legal challenges and congressional investigations. And it establishes precedents about presidential power that will shape American government for generations. Trump has been trying to turn the presidency into an elected dictatorship, and the Supreme Court just said no, emphatically, with 7 justices, including 3 Trump appointees, agreeing. That's a historic rebuke, and it comes at a time when Trump is already facing multiple crises and scandals. This ruling doesn't just check Trump's power, it potentially cripples his presidency, because everything he's been doing has been based on claiming authority he didn't legally have. And now the highest court in the land has told him he never had that authority and can't claim it anymore. That's devastating. And it fundamentally changes what Trump can accomplish between now and either the end of his term or his potential removal from office. This is a turning point. Stay tuned.